Columbian art, or more or less pre-Columbian art, which refers to art created prior to the contact of Christopher Columbus in 1492. Unlike other styles, it demonstrates a very weird, how to say, consistency, or more or less a unique development of very archaic styles presented in prehistoric art styles, yet developed over a period of time to a more refined basis. It's very interesting considering a lot of Native American tribes at the time, prior to Columbian contact, did not exactly interact with each other that much. Therefore, they developed very unique styles of architecture and art in other mediums, of course, like pottery, painting, etc. And when I say pre-Columbian, it's an umbrella term referring to all Native American art that existed prior to the year 1492, the end of the medieval era as well. And through a natural evolution of style, it's a very unique style overall, compared to other styles of the time that relied heavily on the influences of other cultures that around them. And now also, when I say pre-Columbian, I'm mainly referring to South American art. Not because, oh, I prefer South American over the North American, Native American art. It's mainly because the most abundant resources we have in terms of examining art from this time is from the South American tribes. That's mainly because they were the most advanced at the time. Like here, we have an Olmec head. Weirdly enough, we do not know why or how they actually made them, interestingly enough. If I'm not mistaken, that's from Inuits and that's from Peruvians. Here, of course, we have Columbus coming in here with good intentions. Where was it used? Of course, prior to Columbian contact, this type of art style was used across the Americas and very isolated, unique groups of people, such as the Aztecs, Incas, Mayas, etc., that were dotted across the American continents. And because of the many groups inhabiting the Americas at the time, many of these art styles would evolve very uniquely and separate from each other, with very little interaction besides many of the larger South American groups that may or may not have contacted through trade routes, although many of these groups were largely Neolithic at best, meaning they only had a solid grasp on farming, and trade was not exactly their main focus at the time. And of course, we can see the very distinct styles of art. Here we have art from Canada, the totem poles and such, and then we have a cat face apparently from Argentina. Could have fooled me on what that was, but listen, art's subjective. When was it used? Pre-Columbian art is a term that refers to prior to 1492. So all of this art was created prior to 1492, of course, by the 13,000 or so different tribes that inhabited America, coincidentally 13,000 years ago. There was many distinct tribes of people, many distinct art styles, and what it was used for could vary largely. Sometimes it was used for religious ceremony and sometimes used for cultural storytelling. And a lot of earlier societies like Egypt would also exhibit similar signs of this for religious uses, if you will. Art also served as, because of its versatility, it served at many different purposes. As presented here, art was used as a means of warfare as well, and a very unique example as what is known as an Aztec death whistle. Now, of course, we don't exactly have any intact death whistles that were used at the time prior to 1492 in a pre-Columbian style. So, of course, we've recreated them using blueprints and earlier examples we may have found. Bit of a warning, these are very strange sounding whistles. Early psychological warfare. So yeah. And of course, art served as a means of keeping track of things and storytelling when languages failed, considering the advent of language in pre-Columbian America had not exactly reached a point yet. It was more or less similar to Egyptian hieroglyphs. Trivia! Everyone gets candy if you can answer correctly. Well, not everyone. He who answers correctly gets candy. So, following the arrival of Columbus to the New World, many well-known explorers would travel to the New World, the Americas at the time. But because of their conquest, if you would, and their bringing of diseases, many major empires would collapse. One of these major empires being the Aztecs. So, who can tell me who was the last Aztec emperor? Quetzalcoatl, Montezuma, Achamadad, or Legate Linnaeus? You.
Montezuma.
Nope.
Oh, man.
He was the last major one, but he was not the last one. Anyone else?
Was it for demo?
Yes, it was.
Yay.
My second pick was Lego Linnaeus.
Yeah, of course it would have been Legate Linnaeus. This is a picture of him. Pretty cool dude by the looks of it. Famous practitioners. So, similar to prehistoric art and several other art styles of very early modern humans, we don't exactly have a lot of practitioners that we know of, mainly because they weren't exactly well regarded, considering the fact art was mainly related to things like priesthood and everything, considering its religious implications and storytelling implications. So, what we could assume of famous practitioners of art in pre-Columbian America, they were likely ranging from different pay scales, if you would. Some could have been in poverty and some could have been in high places, depending on their religious association, depending on the group of people they were with. Of course, their success depended on the aristocratic ties and religious ties they held, depending on the society they lived in. Of course, Aztecs weren't exactly the friendliest group of people to be a religious figure in, but what can you do? Spotlight. So, again, pre-Columbian implies that it's prior to the Columbian contact of Christopher Columbus. Fun fact, Columbus was just like the worst human being ever. Either by pure cruelty or gross incompetence, probably a combination of both as it was at this time. Columbus, famous for his incompetence as his position of governor of the New World. Fun fact, he had no idea he was actually in a separate continent. He still thought he was in India by the time he died. He had been governor of the New World for roughly like 5 years at this point and still thought he was in India. Real cool dude. Killed over 300,000 natives too. Thanks, guy. Mainly because of slavery and disease to the natives. What can you do? Also, fun fact, because this was after 1492 and the Inquisition of Spain was happening, he was arrested for his incredible cruelty to his slaves, which is a crazy thing to say, that you were arrested for cruelty by Inquisition-era Spain. He was well known for abusing his position and his remarkable brutality to not just his slave but his fellow Spaniards as well. And of course, he was so awful, 50,000 natives on record committed mass suicide rather than join his slave groups. Now that's how you run an empire.
And we have a day for him.
Yeah, October 10th. And he died alone and without any friends, just like someone like this deserves. Now here's the better version, basically. This is Leif Erikson, the coolest guy ever. He's basically better Columbus. Viking dude who actually discovered America. Columbus didn't discover anything. This guy did. Leif Erikson, son of Eric the Red. They weren't exactly the most creative when it came to names. Yeah, Chad Leif Erikson. Historical significance. This is, of course, a picture of Teotihuacan, Mexico. Pretty cool place. Former head of the Aztec Empire. Now, the main point to draw from this for historical significance is, one, the art itself allowed for us to greatly dissect and understand a group of people that were largely decimated through European trade and contact that we don't have a lot of written accounts about, nor do we have a lot of accurate accounts, considering the Spaniards were very exaggeratory in their descriptions of these people. So this art style itself served to allow us to understand this culture to its most insignificant portions, like how they cook their food, to very important parts like their religious practices. It's also important to note that it is a very unique style that developed largely on its own with little to no contact, yet it still maintained a very strange evolution of very early prehistoric styles. It's also a testament to the ingenuity and cultural significance of pre-Columbian art, considering that despite no contact and a largely isolated lifestyle thanks to geography and general dislike of each other, it still developed very unique styles. Although it's also rare that it did entirely die out with European colonization and further investments. Now we have the Nazca lines of Peru. This is a very cool place, considering these are like miles wide art pieces that were made by simply just removing the stones of the red valleys they reside in. How they were able to get pieces of this size to look this accurate from like an eye height of like 20,000 feet, we do not know. Mainly because we don't know a lot about these people. Here we have some examples. This is, of course, Aztec deities. Aztecs were very extravagant when it came to designs for deities. Here we have Huitzilopochtli, father of the Aztecs. We got I swear that's Tezcatlipoca, god of the night, of course. Quetzalcoatl, the feathered serpent. Here's a example of the very strange practices, if you would, of the Aztecs. This is Zipe Totec. If you may have noticed, he is wearing another guy's skin. This was a very popular practice during the reign of the Aztec Empire. It was to represent the spring equinox. They'd take your skin off in one sheet and wear it like a crazy coat for roughly 3 or so weeks. And here we have our resources. Any questions? You get candy if you ask questions.
Can you imagine how bad that would smell? Is that technically a question or
They
just
probably,
Hey,
they
that can serve
probably,
the
they
question.
probably tanned it, wouldn't
Yeah,
you think?
probably cured it like leather.
Yeah. Still smells though, if you've ever been to a tannery,
I play
it's
softball.
a horrendous smell.
Oh yeah.
Do you think that the name pre-Columbian alone would be considered offensive to call the artwork of all indigenous peoples of the Americas?
Well, on one hand, it serves as a large umbrella term to refer to Native American art prior to Columbian contact, and it does definitely degrade to an amount that instead of recognizing the very intricate and very diverse group of Native Americans that existed prior to Columbian contact, it also serves to more or less categorize the large group of natives that definitely died out thanks to European colonization afterwards, and serves as a more or less easier way to digest the large amounts of information that comes associated with this.
Right.
Any more questions? Anything from you? Come on. Just